She has pioneered analytics in Europe by establishing vendor independence and focusing on the interaction of tools and data to support her clients' strategies. 2 years ago, she co-founded her second startup, Mind Your Privacy, by adding social media and privacy to her data science background. Please welcome on stage Chief Visionary Officer and founder of Mind Your Privacy, AURELIE POLS.
Hi, good afternoon. Ooh, this is very loud. Thank you for sticking with us after lunch. I hope you had nice morning sessions. I want to talk a bit about privacy and data protection in the cloud. I know it's usually not the favorite topic for this kind of crowd, but I wanted to give you some points and tips about things that are changing in this space when it comes to legal counsel and privacy professionals you might be talking to because they're starting to ask questions. So I'll run you through a couple of ideas that you can have some takeaways to go home with and start thinking about it. Hands up, who's heard about the Target pregnancy issues? The data science examples that they did about pregnancy and the fact that they predicted when women were pregnant and a father came to a Target store to say, hey, my God, you're telling my daughter, a 15-year-old daughter, that she's pregnant. Well, she's actually not. Turned out the daughter was actually pregnant. That was the first time that Target entered the media space related to how they use data and the cloud. The second time, a couple of months later, at the end of 2013, something to their data happened. They got breached. The consequence of this, in January, about a month later, in January 2014, is that they had to accept that about 70 million customer records had been hacked. Following this timeline, what happened is that Target's CIO resigned in March, 3 months later, and the CEO also resigned 2 months after that. So starting with the pregnancy, oh, this is great, what we're doing with data and things like that, but it's maybe a bit creepy, we followed into, oh, the data got breached and people got fired. So this is maybe an interesting cautionary tale, but it doesn't end here. So I wanted to talk a bit about this in order to make you think about the uses of data and legislation. In February 2014, Target profit fell by 46%. Boom. And about a year later, what happened is that a lot of companies that were involved in this started to file lawsuits against the data breach. So all this started a year and a half ago, but it's a continuous maelstrom of issues that are slowly but surely building up and that have affected the profit of Target in very intensive ways. So you might ask yourselves, okay, so they got breached, they did funky stuff with data science. How many lawsuits are they facing today? The CEO resigned, everything's fine, right? Any ideas? How many lawsuits? Give me a number. 5, 10, 50, 140. 140 lawsuits followed their data breach in December of 2013, and they're still ongoing. So these are just some examples of how many millions some of their partners are asking from them. But the data breach did not stop in December 2013. We're still talking about this. And the interesting thing is also these kinds of lawsuits, as they drag on so much within the judicial system in the United States, 80% of them get settled. So the bill that Target is going to pay for their data breach will be in the several hundreds of millions, whatever happens. I want you to think about that. When we use tools in the cloud, there are other examples of what happens. Recently, a Brazilian telco called Oi got fined for the use of a tool called Form. For anybody that's been in the digital analytics space like I have for the last 15 years, they would have known that if you Google Form, you will find that BT got fined for the exact same thing 7 years ago. So this is not new. When using very simple tools like email campaigning tools, France Télécom got a warning from French data protection agency, the CNIL, because one of their subcontractors' databases got breached. Using data is not only data inside your premises and inside your own vicinities. We're talking about cloud. We're talking about data flows between different tools. So it means also responsibility of your own company with the data that you're using. This is an example of how the privacy fines have been growing over the last couple of years, and this is just the first 6 weeks of 2014. First 6 weeks of 2014 was half of the privacy fines of 2013. This is a liability, and it's increasing. Not a day goes by without people hearing about data breaches. The question is not if you're going to get breached, the question is when. And how much it's going to cost your company, and who's going to fall for that. You need to review your suppliers and know which data is where, within which cloud, with which security measures. This is not just something you're going to plug and play. This is about responsibility that you'll have to take, whether we're talking about software as a service, platform as a service, or information as a service. More cloud providers out there, more risk. So the question I often get as I sit between analytics and legal counsel is, should we be compliant? What about privacy? What about security? Pun intended, these are moving targets, it's true. Privacy legislation is evolving all the way through. So I would want to leave you with a checklist, an idea, something you need to discuss within your company. Know where your data is. Take a picture of your data setup. Evaluate the risks of having this data stored within different environments. Set up a compliance checklist. Which legislation applies where? And then ensure that your data is secured. This is going to be fundamental in the next couple of years. EU fines, today they are ridiculous. Not a lot of people know that, but basically Spain is responsible for 80% of data protection fines in the EU. There's a new regulation coming up that's talking about 5% of global turnover. We're going to talk about millions of euros that are going to be cast away because of issues related to data protection. Data basically is a risk because it exists. Start thinking about that. Start thinking about where your data is, who has access to it, what you can do about it. The problem is going to start within your company sooner or later. Thank you very much.